Y'all are probably quite aware of sort of his characteristics that he's so well known for. He is known for his good works, for living a simple lifestyle. He really found liberty through poverty. He felt the presence of God in nature, recognized the sacredness of all creatures of God. He was a mystic. He founded the Franciscan order. He's the patron saint of Italy, and he's also considered the patron saint of the environment. So these are the kind of things I think most of us know about St. Francis. The fact that he was born in 1181, he died in the year 1226 at about age 85. So the historical memory in Europe is such that the year 1226 really wasn't that long ago. And when you walk around Florence, for example, where I live, or my house was built shortly after that, basically. If you walk around Florence, you're literally in the shadow of buildings that were built in that time period. So the idea that St. Francis died in 1226, it just wasn't that long ago, and people really have kind of a connection to him. And there are plenty of places where you can go and say, St. Francis was here, literally, like he slept here, he walked here, this was his house. And in fact, this is Assisi that you see here. And this is in fact his house on the lower left there. So Francesco was born into a wealthy family. His father was a luxury textile merchant. So he grew up with kind of a privileged lifestyle. I mean, this is a time period when a lot of people suffered from poverty. And this is an area of the country where out in the countryside, there are still, farmer families that don't have basically, they're not that well off. And in fact, the Easter breakfast that we're about to make kind of comes from that tradition. St. Francis did not come from that tradition. He came from this wealthy background, grew up very privileged. But he was known for being kind of a more serious person. Even though he had a relatively easy life, he was given to performing good works. And here's a scene from the life of St. Francis. And here he's shown as a young man giving his cloak to a poor person. And this image comes from a fresco cycle in the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi. And it was done sort of in the late 1200s. And we'll talk about that in detail, but this is kind of illustrates some scenes from his life. So here he is as a young man giving his cloak to a poor person. He also had a tendency towards spirituality and mysticism, and found himself, he was a young man kind of in this privileged situation, and young men of that station also ended up participating in military campaigns. They were expected to do that. So Francesco, as a young person, also did participate in military campaigns, but it happened that he was on his way to one of these battles, and he actually had one of these mystic experiences, and God told him to turn around, go home, and dedicate himself to prayer. And he did. He turned around, he went home, and he spent time praying in solitude, seeking enlightenment in the church called San Damiano in Assisi. And you can see that pictured here in the center. And he prayed directly to the crucifix. And that image on the right is the crucifix of the Church of San Damiano. And it's kind of a peculiar image, I think, to modern eyes, but this is the way crucifixes were painted in that time period, sort of late 1100s. And then on the left, you can see this is another one of those images from the fresco cycle of the life of St. Francis that is visible today in the Basilica in Assisi. So here he is. He's in the broken down church of San Damiano. You can see the roof is kind of halfway open, and there's kind of a wall missing. And he's praying to the crucifix. And what happens here is another mystical experience. Jesus speaks to him and encourages him to repair my house. And eventually, St. Francis went on to sort of revitalize the church. But in this instance, he sort of took it literally. And San Damiano needed some work. So St. Francis decided that he was going to follow God's word and fix this church up. And he took some money from his dad's business and tried to give it to the priests here at San Damiano. They weren't really happy about it because they didn't think he had gone about, they felt like they were getting stolen money, basically, because the dad, Pietro, Francesco's father, was livid. He wasn't consulted on this, and it's not the way he wanted to spend his money. So he's furious, and he hauls Francesco in front of the bishop. And this is that moment when we've all heard that Francesco kind of renounced his inheritance and gave, he actually took his clothes off and gave them back to his father. And that's what's happening here in this scene on the left, with the close-up there on the right. So you can see the family members are there on the left, and his father is being restrained by some of the other relatives. And he's actually holding the clothes that Francesco has taken off. Francesco says, I'm gonna follow my spiritual father. And so he's praying and he's looking up at the sky. If you follow Francesco's sight line, you can see the hand of God. Remember how the hand of God comes down and blesses? In this time period, they didn't actually show God. They thought that would be heretical. So they only show the hand of God. So the hand of God comes down out of the clouds and is making contact here directly with Francesco. So Francesco renounces his inheritance, his birthright, basically, gives back everything that he has of his father's back to the father, gives up the trappings of this wealthy family lifestyle and chooses a simple life of poverty, living on his own outside. He doesn't become a priest. He becomes kind of an itinerant preacher. And he goes around, he actually travels the entire world. He literally traveled the entire Mediterranean basin and made it all the way to the Holy Land. So he travels around and he's preaching the Gospels. He's preaching about living a life of simplicity and love and recognizing the sacredness of all living things. And in doing this, literally by living by example and his pure devotion, he really did go on to kind of revolutionize and revive the church. So he was a very charismatic preacher, a very strong leader. So he had a group, he had a big following, which of course became the Franciscan order. And then of course, a couple of minor orders as well, and the Poor Clares. So he clearly had great success with this sort of humble approach. So there's a story that he was walking around sort of in Casentino, doing his sort of itinerant preaching, and he heard about a party that was taking place for the investiture of a knight. So this would be a young person, probably similar to the lifestyle that he had led previously, was being knighted. And that was sort of a party situation. And that was a good opportunity for him to, meet a lot of people and have an opportunity to speak and share his view of the gospel and living a simple life. So at this gathering, apparently, people were just enraptured with what he had to say, and none more than the Count of Chiusi, who thought that he could really benefit. The Count thought that Francesco could really benefit by having a place to have a spiritual retreat in nature, and gave him this spot that's called La Verna. And so today it's called Chiusi de la Verna, and that's what you see here. So St. Francis went here quite often. He literally traveled the world, and then he would come back and spend several months here at Chiusi la Verna. Again, living in nature, which he felt like was literally the mirror of God, and in solitude and praying and meditating. Today there's a Franciscan sanctuary here, and it's open. You can go to mass, you can have a meal. They have a restaurant. They actually have rooms. You can come and stay here. This is what it looks like. It's nice to go, and it's not too far from where I live. We can kind of make a day trip over there, and it's really beautiful. It's very rugged. It's really remote. And you can see just kind of like, climbing through nature, what it looks like. And on the right there is literally St. Francis's cell here at the sanctuary at La Verna. So you can see how humble his situation was. So late in his life, he had the habit of coming here for several months at a time. Late in his life, he had passed the reins of the order over to his associates. He was kind of in retirement, basically. He came to La Verna, and he prayed he was here, in solitary kind of spiritual retreat, and he prayed to share in Christ's pain. He wanted to share in Christ's passion. And he had another mystical vision, and it was an angel on a crucifix who actually gave him the stigmata. This is the first documented case of a saint receiving the stigmata. And for those of y'all who don't know what that is literally when a holy person develops the wounds that Christ received on the cross. So nail wounds, nail marks in the hands and feet, and then the spear on the side, the spear cut on the side. So this is 1224 when St. Francis received the stigmata. He died just 2 years later. He was ill. He was actually almost blind at this point. He was never alone, obviously. While he was out reading, one of his associates was reading the Psalms to him, and that's who you see there on the right. This person is reading the Psalms to Francis, who could no longer see to read the Bible himself. So he dies in the year 1226. He was canonized by the Pope, who was a friend of his, as a matter of fact, in 1228. And the next day, they laid the cornerstone for the great Basilica of San Francesco in Assisi. So the church then was founded in 228. It was built into the mid 1200s and then decorated in the late 1200s and early 1300s. So we're going to talk more in depth about the decorations here in the church, but just to give you an idea what it looks like. So it's called the Basilica of St. Francis. It's actually kind of a double decker church. There's an upper church and a lower church. You can see it's very kind of Gothic in style with these articulated entry portals, the rose windows. Here you get an idea for how huge of a complex it is. It's built kind of onto a hillside. So there's these arcades that kind of hold the structure up. There's some buttressing even, which is relatively uncommon in Italian buildings. But here it helps kind of keep the taller upper church stable. So here's the interior of the upper church. And this defines what becomes known as Franciscan Gothic. It's a single nave. So what's different about this is that it's not the, a lot of times you'll see a church that has a nave with columns and then aisles on either side. This is a single straight nave, goes right down to the apse, and there's a transept that crosses over. So it's kind of, it looks like a cross in section. The plan, excuse me, looks like a cross, but it's a straight shot nave. The nave here is divided into 4 bays, and each bay is heavily decorated. Every square inch of this church, in fact, is heavily decorated. And you can see that the decoration goes from fancy stained glass windows to literally just geometric decorations on the architectural details. They're actually emphasizing the architectural elements. You can see how the ribs come up from the columns and spring up to form the vaults. They've done some fictive details, such as this is fictive tapestry that's hung in the bottom, on the bottom register of the wall. So look, get an idea for the scale as well. So this is a pew. So clearly a person who stands up is looking up at these images. They're you know, you're looking straight up at them like this. So the fresco decoration then, which you can see here, we've already seen some examples of this. Most often is as if it were just a picture put on the wall. Sometimes it's actually meant to be more illusionistic, and we'll see some of that, as if you're looking into space that is beyond actually the wall. So the purpose of the decorations here are not just because they're pretty, which they are, but they're to illustrate the story of the saint, which we've seen a couple of images of that. And here in the upper church, there is a fresco cycle of 28 images illustrating the story of St. Francis. It's to illustrate themes that were important to St. Francis, themes from the Bible and the Gospels, things like the Passion and the resurrection of Christ. So the idea is to educate the parishioners, most of whom were not able to actually read the Bible themselves. So it was for educational purposes that this was done. And you see this a lot in Franciscan churches. This is the interior of the lower church. It's basically a similar idea with a straight shot nave and the transept with the crossing. Here there are some side chapels, 2 of which you see there on the right, and we're going to take a look at some of the paintings in there. So the best artists of the day were brought in here to do these extreme. You can see how complicated the decorative scheme is here. There's a lot going on. They're trying to confer a lot of information, and they're covering a lot of ground. And this is St. Francis was very well known, and the sponsors of these works of art were kind of some big guys from the Vatican and Rome, for example. So they brought in all the best artists of the day. Those guys came in with workshops, and they're frescoing here. Frescoes you can only do really in spring and summer, and it takes quite a long time to lay a fresco down. This went on for years. This went on for decades. So for decades, the best artists in Italy had very big workshop situations going on the interior of this church. So what you end up with is some kind of interesting cross-contamination between artists. So what's cool here is that basically this is the seed. You're looking at the seeds of humanism. You're looking at the seeds of the Renaissance. It's not going to happen for another 120 years or so, but this is the seeds of the Renaissance. So what happens here is these artists are brought in, and we know who some of them are because we have documents. So we know that Cimabue was here, Giotto, also those are 2 Florentine artists. We know that Simone Martini and Pietro Lorenzetti were here. Those are 2 Sienese artists. And we know exactly what they painted. We know what their style looks like. We have documents that say what they were doing. And then there's this great cycle of the story of the life of St. Francis, the 28 things that were frescoed in the upper church. We have no idea who painted these. And there's been a lot of argument about it and a lot of speculation for literally centuries, but basically we don't know. And we can pretend like we do, but we don't know who this is. So it's kind of frustrating. The other thing is these are some of the panels that were painted first. And whoever this guy was, and in fact, it was probably 3 guys, whoever they were, they influenced everybody. Everybody else who came into that church was influenced by this. So just to give you an idea of the importance of this person or people, I have one of my art history textbooks, literally from graduate school, says that this is one of the supremely important events in the history of European art. Okay, not in the history of Tuscan art or Umbrian art or Italian art. This is one of the most important events in the history of European art, and it's the painting of the life of St. Francis. So again, we're looking at the seeds of humanism. And I'm going to show you why this is so different and why this is so huge. Okay, this is 1296-ish. And done by, again, we think maybe 3 masters in their workshops. We're not really sure who these people are. What had been sort of the style of the day, just not even a whole generation earlier, were things like this. This is Coppo di Marcobaldo. He's painting in Florence. He died in 1276. So that's 20 years before the St. Francis stories were painted. But look here, you can see there's a real connection with Byzantine art. And you're looking at a painting on the left and a mosaic on the right. A lot of these artists did both paintings and mosaics. And in fact, the guys who did the life of St. Francis perhaps were in that same category doing mosaics as well. But what's kind of cool to notice here to kind of make this, obviously you can tell it's different, but I'm going to show you what's really different. This is the hieratic features of the Madonna, for example, those slanty eyes, these very static, flat types of compositions. And then one kind of key here, look at how the folds of the drapery are handled. They've used these gold striations to kind of model, not model, but kind of bring to life the drapery. They're indicating the drapery with these gold striations. So let's jump back here to, here we go, the Master of the St. Francis story. And you can see what is so different here. So we don't know who this guy is, but like I said, it's groundbreaking. So think about what we just looked at, and then just take a look at this painting. The image on the right is the detail of the face of St. Francis. So here's St. Francis. He's giving his cloak to a poor man. Look at the volume of the figures. The low point of view, we're looking up at the figures. That wasn't super common at this point. Naturalistic perspective, just the fact that there's recession into space. There's a little village on a hill. It's in the background. It's not like smack up in your face. The use of light for modeling. Look at that detail on the right, the way those white highlights are picking out sort of the brow bone, the nose, the chin. And then how light's used in the composition, but then also notice just the attention to the composition. In this case, the landscape literally makes a big X marks the spot, so you know where to look. So your eye goes right into the face of St. Francis, and you can't miss it because every single thing, this line and this line intersect here, and then there's an arc here, and there's an arc here, and you end up right back at the face of St. Francis, which is, by the way, gorgeously painted. And it's really nicely painted using kind of modeling strokes. And what's also cool here is that there's no outline. There's no outline on the face. The only thing that's kind of highlighted is the eyes. It's almost like he's got eyeliner on, but think about how far away the viewers are going to be. They had to kind of make sure that you could see certain things. But they did it here with modeling and not just with like a straight, sometimes just a black line around the face. So again, we're not sure who this is, who did this. It kind of looks a little bit like a painter called Pietro Cavallini, who we talked about. He painted in the church of Santa Cecilia in Trastevere, if y'all remember that. Maybe somebody knew him. Some people think maybe Giotto painted these paintings. Some people think Giotto met Cavallini in Rome, and that's why Giotto could paint these paintings. I don't really think Giotto painted these paintings, but that's kind of not neither here nor there. In any event, we do think there were probably 3 separate masters here. So take a look at the gorgeous heavy folds of the drapery. It really looks like a heavy canvas or velvet type of material. And as we go through, here's some more, this is again up in the upper church. This is some Old Testament stories that follow the life of St. Francis. This is Isaac with Jacob and Esau. So this is painted, they actually call this man the painter, the Isaac master. Notice how the folds are so different. It almost looks like ironed linen. Notice too, the dependence on ancient Rome. The figure of Isaac really looks like a Roman funerary monument. So that's the importance of Rome here. The importance of these Roman artists is that they are in contact with the ancient Roman relics that are obviously just abundant, mostly sculpture, but also painting. We don't even have any Roman paintings today. They didn't make it to our day. There were Roman paintings. They believe they were still in existence in this period though. So these guys would have known Roman paintings as well. And in fact, this is the way the color scheme almost kind of makes you think of Pompeii in a certain sense, right? That red background. So this is what's going on in the upper church. These are the first paintings, frescoes to be laid down. And then remember, there's just all sorts of artists coming in and out of there. And they all were a little bit influenced by these guys. Again, we think it's probably 3 groups of painters, either from Rome or with connections to Rome. So one of them is Cimabue, who was literally the godfather of all artists at this point. And his style even softened up considerably. He was an older artist, well established, the most, sort of the most famous artist in Italy until his pupil Giotto took over. But you can see on the left is a detail of a Maestà that Cimabue painted around 1285. Notice the gold background. It's the Madonna and Child enthroned with surrounded by angels. Notice the gold striations. Notice the rather flat space, especially in those angels who just kind of stack up. And then look at the version on the right. This is Cimabue, and this is Maestà that he frescoed in the Basilica of San Francesco. And it's very ruined. So, there's that. Some of the painting is gone, and it's been heavily retouched. So the faces, especially of the Virgin and Child, are not necessarily, just don't pay attention to those. But look at how he constructed the form of the throne. He really made space here. Notice how the angels actually recede back into space. They're not just stacked up on each other. Look at the folds, and then look at the lovely image of St. Francis there on the right. Again, very soft folds in his humble robes. And there's St. Francis. This is one of the earliest images of the saint portraits. He's showing his stigmata and he's holding the Bible. So you can see how Cimabue might have been a little bit influenced by the art that was happening around him by the Roman school. This is in the lower church. These are some paintings by Simone Martini in one of those side chapels. This is a chapel to St. Martin of Tours. So Simone Martini came from a different background. He was from Siena. The Florentine artists tended to lean Latin. They tended to lean towards Rome a little bit. The Sienese artists really they kind of leaned Greek. They kind of leaned into the Byzantine style. And moving it into modernity, of course, he's not using any gold striations in the drapery, but notice the very delicate poetic quality here. Very elegant and graceful compositions. There's a lot of harmony between the lines, the color, the compositions themselves. Very, very gorgeous, kind of delicate, elegant painting. So we're looking at this story of St. Martin of Tours. His background was sort of similar to St. Francis. He was invested as a knight. So he came from one of these kind of wealthy families. You can see his investiture there on the left. He's being given a sword. He's surrounded by his companions who are, sort of doing they're wealthy, the pastimes of these wealthy young men. They're playing music and singing. This guy's got a falcon. I'm going to show you a detail in a second. So they're really, doing some hunting and sport. It's kind of as their station would allow. On the right, though, it doesn't take long before St. Martin has had enough of this, and he actually renounces his knighthood. He gives his sword here back to the ruler. They're actually at a site of battle, and you can see there's in this kind of a campsite, kind of a wartime tent situation. And here's the king or baron or whoever he is. He's got his sort of crown of golden olive leaves on, and he's sitting on one of these amazing chairs, this little camp chair, and they fold up, and you kind of take them with you. And you can still find these things in antique markets around here, and they're gorgeous. I've always been kind of intrigued by those. So here's St. Martin. He's like, I'm done with this. I'm giving you the sword back. He's got a cross in his other hand. He's like, I'm out of here, and he's going to go off and do good works himself. And he does. And this is one of the most common images that you see of St. Martin. Here he is sharing his cloak with the poor man. He doesn't give the cloak to the poor man. He slashes it in half with his sword and gives the other half to the poor man. Here's some details. So you can see Simone, really, again, gorgeous, elegant painter, such great detail. And then look at the saints on the left there. That's St. Mary Magdalene holding the jar of the sort of perfumed oils. And then St. Catherine of Siena, she's another patron saint of Italy. Notice how they're both very volumetric figures. Simone had his eyes open when he was, walking through the building site of the church. And also very nice here, the fictive architecture. So he's built these great, kind of spindly, lovely, delicate trefoil, kind of a loggia, and the two female saints are actually standing inside the loggia. It's almost like he sort of pierced the wall to create fictive space. Giotto worked on the chapel to the Magdalene. So Giotto's the great master who is often credited with kind of, he's sort of sowing the seeds of humanism. He actually wasn't alone, but he's gotten a lot of credit for it because one of the people who wrote the biographies of the artists was a Florentine, and kind of patriotic as Florentines happen to be. Florentines are very patriotic. And so that guy writing the 1550s gave a lot of, he gave a lot of attributions to Giotto, including the life of St. Francis on the upper floor of the, in the upper church. I think it was for patriotic reasons. I could be wrong. I'm not a Giotto scholar, so I don't know. But here's paintings done by Giotto in his workshop. These were done in the 1320s. So we're a good kind of 25, 30 years out now. And this is the Chapel of the Magdalene. And there are, various sort of a cycle of frescoes that depict the life of Mary Magdalene. She was particularly in the heart of St. Francis. She was the prostitute who became a disciple of Christ. She was a key witness to Christ's ministry. That's happening here. She's present at the raising of Lazarus, who happens to be her brother. She was at the crucifixion and participated in the resurrection as well. So here you can see Giotto doing that great thing where, very, very clear composition, volumetric figures. The landscape is showing you exactly where you need to look. So in case if you're not real sure that this is Christ, his head is at the base of this great triangle, and then this great kind of downward slope lands right here with also some lightening of the rocks. I mean, you can't miss the fact that that's Christ. And then he has this great Noli me tangere. So this is Mary Magdalene who sees the resurrected Christ. So this is Christ who's risen from the tomb. You see the empty tomb of Christ on the left. He's in this great landscape, resplendent with the light that is coming from the risen Christ, who just has rays of light shooting out from him. And Mary Magdalene, look at her face. She's so happy to have seen the risen Christ. And he says, no, you can't, I can talk to you, but you can't touch me. And so she's reaching out for him, and he says, no, you can't. But look at how beautiful the composition is. And notice how lovely her face of the Magdalene is as she's reaching out for Christ, who's just out of grasp. But notice how she has that outline around the edge of the, just her still sort of silhouetted by that outline, which makes sure that you can, if you're looking from a distance, you can make her face out, separate her face from the rock behind her. Very nicely painted. Also, look at the nice little veil over her hair. Here we are. This is the last set of paintings I'm going to show you, and then we'll start cooking. We're in the left transept of the lower church. There's so much going on in this basilica, all this decoration. This is a series of paintings of the Passion of Christ. Again, a theme that was very, very dear to St. Francis. And tomorrow, I believe, is Palm Sunday, so it all kind of ties into the theme here of Easter week. So this is Pietro Lorenzetti. He is painting again the early 1300s. He is another master from Siena, so he tends to lean more kind of Byzantine. and again, sort of elegant and dainty painting in a way. But again, he has absorbed lessons from the Roman masters that we saw upstairs and from Giotto, for example. And he painted these 1315 to 1330. So these are some of the later works to be painted. So you can see the chapel itself on the left. You can see all the different images that we're about to look at. And on the right, you see the entry of Christ into Jerusalem. And you can see they're throwing down their palms and throwing down their cloaks to soften the entry into Jerusalem so the donkeys, Christ's donkey, can walk on top of this. So this is Palm Sunday. You can see they're actually tearing the palms out of the tree and throwing them down into the ground. This is a very much sort of international Gothic, kind of very busy composition. I think Pietro Lorenzetti really comes into his own when he does some more kind of clear compositions, and we'll look at that. This is lovely. It's quite beautiful, and it's also clear enough. You can definitely see what's going on, but there's not 1 inch of empty space in there. So this again is he paints the series of the Passion. So we start out on Palm Sunday with Christ's entry into Jerusalem, and some of the other scenes are things like on the left, the Last Supper. On the right, the washing of the feet. Notice the way he's constructed space. Notice also some really great kind of humanistic, just naturalistic details. Look at the guys on the left of the Last Supper. They're cleaning the plates. Look at there's a dog and a cat who are kind of, fighting for scraps down there. On the right, in the washing of the feet. And I love this guy's taking his sandal off. Just very kind of sweet, naturalistic, kind of humble details. Here's the arrest of Christ. Outdoor scene. The landscape's all starting to look quite similar. Everybody uses these very plainer, light-colored mountains. And then on the right, that very interesting deep room where you're viewing the flagellation of Christ. Christ then carries the cross to Calvary, the crucifixion scene. And then I just wanted to get to this one. It's my favorite one of these images. Here's the deposition. So after the crucifixion, Mary and the followers of Christ are allowed to take his body down off the cross and bury it. So that's what's happening here. So deposition means taking the body of Christ off the cross. And you can see that they're literally in the act of taking Christ off the cross. This is such an emotional image, and not just because of what they're actually doing, but you can actually see the blood stains on the crossbar of the cross. Look at Mary. She's pressing her face onto Christ's face. She is running her fingers through his hair. Such just, obvious grief here. Look at Mary Magdalene in the red cloak. She's kissing one foot of Christ. Look at the other foot of Christ. They're literally taking the nail out right now. It's a very moving image. Just gives me chill bumps. But what's so effective about this image, I think, is the composition here. And Pietro Lorenzetti decided to put all the figures kind of a little bit off center, which kind of throws you off a little bit. He's working in a terribly difficult space. So he's in kind of a weird kind of trapezoidal space that's going up into a vault, right? You can kind of see that here, some of the decorations of these ribs and whatnot. But he's got all the figures over here. We've got a triangular space. We also have this kind of overriding arch and more arcs, and they're all kind of linked together by these arcs. And then there's that great expanse of just black blank space. Everything has gone quiet. Very, just to me, very moving image. Pietro Lorenzetti goes on to depict the lowering of Christ into the tomb. It's a little bit ruined painting. The blue has gone. This guy had on a blue robe. The Virgin had on a blue robe. You can see Mary again has her face pressed to the face of Christ. And then triumphant, the resurrection on the right. So Easter Day, Christ, in the presence of all these sleeping Roman soldiers, rises from the tomb with the choirs of angels. So in Assisi, they actually go through some of these. They have some processions for Easter week, and their particular procession for Easter week is that they actually they do a deposition, and they take Christ off the cross. I think this happens on Thursday. They have a Christ on the cross. His arms have hinges, and so they take him off the cross. They move his arms down. They put him onto kind of a funeral bier, and then on Good Friday, he is processed through town and taken from the cathedral, which is what you're looking at here, up to the Basilica of San Francesco, where he's in the presence of the Madonna Adolorata. So this is the Madonna dressed in black with the 7 swords. And then on Easter, I think some other village actually has the Easter morning celebration. So the big celebration in Assisi is on Holy Thursday and Good Friday. So on Easter Day, what do we do in Assisi to celebrate the resurrection, new life? We eat pizza al formaggio. So this is the breaking of the Lenten fast. These women bake bread. I'll tell you about the process because it's quite interesting how they do this. And the bread is actually blessed. The meal that you eat to break your Lenten fast is cheese bread, salami, hard-boiled eggs, and a glass of wine. All this is blessed in church on Good Friday. But I want to show you this picture because I love the way these women, right before they put, these are the risen breads, they put a leaf of an olive branch in there. And I'll explain to you why they do that. And I'm about to make this bread, torta al formaggio. Here are the ingredients we're going to use. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then, okay, tutto okay, Lorenzo?
See, Elena, I have a question for you.
Okay, see.
Before you start cooking, Diane asked, why would the Senese artist lean dark? You say, lean dark is in...
No, I said they lean kind of Greek. They lean Byzantine. They just were in this, they had more of a Byzantine tendency to their art. And I don't know what the reason for that is. So, but that just happened. They just painted that way. The leading masters down there, Duccio was the leading master down there. And the people who came after him, such as Simone Martini and Pietro Lorenzetti, tended in that fashion. That's just the way it was. There may be a better answer than that, but that's my answer. So I'm crumbling. I'm using baker's yeast. You can also use cake yeast. You can use dry granules, and I'll send you the conversion for that. But I'm using quite a lot, like 3 times more than you might normally use, of baker's yeast, and I'm dissolving it in warm milk. So this recipe, I'm using the recipe of my friend Sergio, who comes from a little village right outside of Assisi.
Who is online?
Oh, Sergio, ciao.
Yeah. I think he has the microphone muted.
Okay. So I'm adapting Sergio's grandmother's recipe because Sergio's grandmother basically made enough bread for the whole village, and I'm not making that much. So I had to cut it down. I had to it's like an eighth of the recipe. She literally had like 10 pounds of cheese in there. I'm not doing that. So I'm going to make like a household dose of the pizza al formaggio. So Sergio told me that the ladies would make the bread. Let me get this going and then I'll give you the story here. So this is just regular flour. And I'm going to mix it with a humongous amount of grated Parmesan cheese, grated Romano cheese, and then we're going to stir in yeast, a bunch of eggs, and some butter. We're going to knead in some butter, and you get this great cheesy, eggy, yummy Easter bread. So again, these were kind of, these are folks out in the country who don't have a lot of opportunity to eat rich foods like this. And they must have saved their eggs for a month in order to have enough eggs to make all of this bread. But the ingredients are things people mostly have on hand though. You might have to save some eggs. If everybody had chickens, some flour, and then, some grated cheese. We're putting in some chunks of fresh cheese and a bunch of grated cheese. So I'm making a well here because we're about to put a lot of liquid in here, and I really don't want it to fall into the floor. So I'm trying to make a good well. Okay, and we're going to use 4 whole eggs and 2 egg yolks. Again, I think the original recipe had sort of 3 times this many eggs in it, but I'm making a small version. I have a little bit of shell. You know, when you have shell, you can use, so I have a little bit of shell in my egg, the broken egg. You can actually use the shell as a scooper. Otherwise, y'all may already know that, but it's the only way to get egg shell out of the bowl of your eggs because it's slippery.
I have another wonderful question from Mike. The question is, what did being rich in the 12th century consist of? Is anyone beyond royalty and the church truly rich?
So Francesco's father was a
merchant.
Luxury, he was a luxury textile merchant. So the merchant class did in fact have money. So that set them apart. So they probably always had food. Not everybody always had food, but I feel certain that Francesco not only always had food, he also had fancy clothes and, you know, handmade armor. And, you know, he didn't have to farm all day long just to have food to eat. He could hang out with his friends and go hunting and, you know, sing the day away, playing his panpipes and his lute. Although clearly that wasn't for him. But yeah, there was a merchant class that had money that was quite distinct from the peasant farmer class. So the majority of people were peasant farmers, probably, you know, like basically serfs in service to a feudal landlord. That was kind of the majority of, and those are the folks who were making, this was their Easter breakfast. So I'm going to mix in the yeast, which is, the yeast has been dissolved in warm milk. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of olive oil. The original recipe here calls for lard, and I actually am not totally contrary to lard, but I want some good lard and I couldn't find any. And so I'm perfectly happy to use a butter and olive oil mixture. And I'm using some Sagona olive oil. I don't know if y'all can see that it's emerald green. Can y'all see that? It's beautiful. So I'm just going to mix all this up, and I'm doing this as, you know, as we do when we make pasta. You've seen me make pasta before. Just kind of slowly incorporating the flour into the liquid. I'm also going to add some salt, and the recipe, Sergio's grandma's recipe, is 1 pinch of salt for every egg or yolk in this case. I'm going to do kind of a 2-finger pinch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the women would make these Easter breads on Holy Thursday. And then they would take them into the church on Good Friday, along with some hard-boiled eggs and maybe some salami or some capocolo. And they would put them in a basket, a bottle of wine, put them in a basket very nicely, kind of wrapped in a pretty cloth. And then all of these baskets they take them to church, and all the baskets get piled up in the center of the church, and the priest blesses them. So that on Easter morning, you have this, your blessed Easter breakfast. It's a beautiful tradition, and they're still doing it today. And it's very typical to Umbria. And although the first time I had this, I was at a bakery in Rome, and I just thought it was the most heavenly thing in the world. And then Sergio, our friend, nicely, every time he goes home for a visit, brings us back a torta al formaggio. I think you can find them actually outside of Easter, although that may not be true. They may make them only for Easter. Lorenzo, puoi chiedere a Sergio questa cosa?
Sì, Sergio ti sta ascoltando, no? Quindi Terry asked if some people bake at home or you can shop in the bakery. I say that both of that.
Both. You can shop in the bakery, but this is something that if you're not in Umbria, then there is no bakery that's making it. So I have to make it myself if I want it. And the time I had it was around Easter, but it was in Rome. So there's some bakeries that make it. And Rome's the city. I live in the boonies, so my bakers are not making torta al formaggio. Però I wanted to hear from Sergio. Quindi Sergio, se puoi anche rispondere nel chat, volevo sapere se da te, giù in Umbria, lo fanno questa ricetta solo a Pasqua o se lo fanno anche durante l'anno perché è piacevole e la gente piace. So I just asked Sergio if he would.
I send an SMS, a short message on the phone.
Good. All right, so we'll get an answer from the source.
if he responds, I think only in the Easter periods, because I'm going I'm going very lot of time with my motorbike in Umbria, but in the other period of the years I cannot find. And there is a very tasty salami in Umbria. The name is ciauscolo. I write in the chat if you want. It's very fresh salami. It's like our sausage.
Oh, yeah, I've had that before.
Very big one, and it's very incredible with the Easter.
And so you can really only get that, I think, down there. I've never seen that kind of thing up here. In fact, I couldn't even find capocolo. So I'll show you, I'm having just some regular kind of Tuscan salami. But the idea is such that we're there. Although it probably is only made at Easter, because even like Christmas panettone is only made at Christmas, even though people love it. They don't make it during the year. So I'm going to start trying to work this with my hands. It's kind of a sticky dough. It gets kneaded quite a while. Again, I'm going to add, as soon as it comes together, I'm going to knead in some butter and some black pepper. And I've actually let the butter go soft. I stirred in some cracked black pepper and let it sit for 2 days. So I'm trying to I really want to get some black pepper aroma in there. And I really like the black pepper, so I'm even going to add more on top of that. So I'm doing this now with my hands and the handy dough scrapers, which I highly recommend you get one of if you don't have one. Also for making pasta or pie crust or anything, it's super handy. And I couldn't do this without it. So my eggs were so beautiful. Can you see how yellow that dough is coming together? It's also super sticky. I'm about to add some more flour. So the quantity of flour is always kind of a suggestion. It's kind of humid today, so I think I'm going to need to add some more flour. Every flour is different, and the weather makes it act different anyway. So let's see. Oopsie. I'll put that over there. So I'm going to kind of start kneading. I'm going to knead in flour until it basically stops sticking to my hands, and keep my surface nicely floured.
Elaine, I ask Sergio to open his mic.
Oh, good.
You can try.
Ciao, Sergio.
Ancora no? Wait.
Ok.
Eccolo.
Ecco. Ciao.
Ciao, Sergio.
Allora, buon lavoro.
Che dici? Come va? Che dici?
Ma ottimo, ottimo. First class.
I get good marks from Sergio. Good.
Traditionally is only for the breakfast and the Easter day.
Okay.
But sometimes some people make also for the next Sunday after the Easter.
Sunday after what?
Typically, è tipica, viene fatta solamente, praticamente è tipica solo per la mattina di Pasqua. Solo per la colazione.
Quindi the one that you brought us last week, they made that because it's Easter time?
Aspetta che c'è Andrea che... Scusa, mi ripeti la domanda che c'avevo?
Dicevo, quello che hai portato qua settimana scorsa l'hai trovato perché stiamo avvicinando alla Pasqua e quindi l'hai trovato?
Sì. Ora magari qualcuno lo produce anche un po' prima, un po' dopo, insomma ormai...
Sì, ok.
Però trovano solo principalmente per il periodo di Pasqua.
Okay, so basically you have to be in Umbria at Easter to get this bread, unless you want to make it yourself. So I'm now going to add a large amount of softened butter.
I close the mic of Sergio. Sergio, okay. If you want, you can open your mic and come and say.
No.
Sì, Sergio, sì, fai commenti a volontà. So I'm kneading in an enormous quantity of butter that's kind of softened, and it's been sitting with black pepper in it for a couple of days. And I'm going to add some more black pepper because, like I said, I really like black pepper in here, and that's kind of a lot, but I'm going for it because it's good.
But in the Sergio recipe, that you have butter or lard?
Sergio gave it to me with butter.
Okay.
I believe. Justo Sergio. I've adapted. I freely admit I've adapted Sergio's grandmother's recipe. So
and Kathy,
I decided to use the butter.
Kathy asked, is salted or unsalted butter? But in Italy, it's very difficult to find salted butter.
It's unsalted butter, right? Yeah, Italians don't do, but which is why I added a good amount of salt. So this needs to get kneaded really well. I may not knead it the whole way since I don't want to keep y'all online forever. And you can also do this in a, if you really want to, in a KitchenAid, although it's much more satisfying to do it this way, I think. It's a super soft dough. It's not hard to knead at all. And I want the dough, I want it to be a very moist torta, and so I'm trying to add as little flour as possible, you know, just enough so that it doesn't stick to my hands. And I can see it's coming together. If y'all have any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and knead for a bit, and then I'm going to show you how to put it into the forms. And actually, I'll explain the olive leaf thing. So first of all, we don't have palm branches around here. I don't know why we do have palm trees, but what we have in abundance are olive branches. So on Palm Sunday, we get blessed olive branches. This is not a blessed olive branch. This is a non-blessed olive branch. Tomorrow we'll get the blessed olive branches. And so the women who go to the communal ovens or their own personal ovens in Umbria often will kind of bless the dough when they put it in the oven and bless it when they come out. But some people, I discovered, actually put a little leaf into the dough, and I think that is the sweetest thing. So I have taken to doing that. So the longer you work the dough, the more you develop the gluten, and you're going to get a springier, taller bread. But I'm going to go ahead and just pretend like I'm done. I would do this for a few more minutes. So if y'all do this at home, you would do it for a few more minutes. And I'm going to add some fresh cheese. You can use, this is a fresh pecorino, and it's going to just melt and kind of make a hole where it was, where the piece of cheese was, kind of turns into a hole when you cut the dough in big chunks. You can see. Y'all can use even, and this is common as well, I decided to use a sheep's milk cheese just to kind of go for some authenticity. Although the recipe from the grandmother actually said Gruyere. And you can use Swiss cheese or Gruyere in here. And I've had it that way several times, and it is really good. So you don't have to really work too hard on finding unusual cheeses. So I'm not really kneading anymore. I'm just kind of mixing that cheese in so that it's kind of evenly distributed. And now you can bake this in a super big form like this and just make one big, huge one. And you put it in here, let it rest in a warm place for about 2 hours, goes into the oven for an hour. Or I'm gonna make 2 smaller ones just because that way I have more breads and I don't have that many people that I'm feeding, so I can give one away as a present. So I have 2 Charlotte molds in this case. The form, that happens to be a panettone form. These are Charlotte molds. And I'll show you what the ladies in Umbria do. So these are 2 Charlotte molds, one tiny, one bigger. They're covered with butter, if y'all can see that. This thing is gonna, the bread is gonna come right out, but only because it's, the form is literally slathered with butter. So the dough should be about 1/3 up the way of the sides of the pan, 1/3 or so. And it's done rising when it gets to the top of the pan or after 2 hours. If your pan is too big, it may not get to the top. So I'm gonna let it rise like that. I'm gonna cover it up and put it in a warm place, which is gonna be on the top of my refrigerator. I'll be right back. So this is the version that I made ahead. And I did this. First of all, I stuck the olive leaf in there after it was risen. It didn't come up all the way. I didn't have enough dough. But this, you can see I just put it in a pot. So the ladies in Umbria literally just use what, they don't have a fancy form. They literally use the pot they cook spaghetti in. And they just plop the dough in there, put an olive leaf on it, and then bake it in the oven, and it's gorgeous. Isn't that pretty? So I'm going to show you how I'm going to lay out a full-on Easter breakfast. Get rid of some of this stuff. So here are the components of Easter breakfast. We have torta al formaggio. I have two kinds of salami, neither of which are Umbrian salamis because I couldn't find them because I live in the boondocks and we're in red zone. So we're having Tuscan salami. And I have a hard-boiled egg, which obviously this would be blessed if we were having this on Easter. And hang on, glass of wine, just a little nip. And apparently they actually do drink red wine at breakfast on Easter. So I guess that's how you break your Lenten fast. I'm gonna go ahead and cut into this so you can see how it looks.
In the picture that you showed before, some people put the dog in the large tin cans.
Yes, also just in tin cans.
Like for the tomatoes, for example.
Yeah.
You can buy the big one, cans for tomatoes.
Or like even like a coffee can. My grandmother used to have them, but I was thinking about that this week. My grandmother would have just used a big, like a, big old 2-pound coffee can. Butter it really well, and you can definitely do that. The cooking time is a little different. Like it takes longer in a real form, and if you use the coffee can, it takes a little bit less time. I guess just the way the heat transfers in the coffee can. But yeah, you can definitely do that. So it's not a picky recipe at all, and it is just so luscious and savory, and it is a real treat. And you can see why it's a good way to really, break your Lenten fast and celebrate the resurrection. Any more questions?
Only someone who candidate to have a gift for you.
What?
who want the torta for a gift.
Oh.
It's Alessandro is very near to you, so you can send it.
Can you do a close up? Bring it up to close up to the camera.
Oh, I will. Okay, hang on. Let me come around. Let me come around there. I'm going to show you the wine. You know what that looks like.
Great.
So here's the whole platter. Isn't it lovely?
Wow.
Look at the bread. You can kind of see how.
Take the bread very near.
Yeah, I will.
The slice. Okay.
Yeah. So here's the bread.
Wow.
So you can kind of see like there's a hole right here where the I use Gruyere in this one, and the Gruyere melts. It's just, it's just really luscious, and I'm trying to get out of that shadow. There you go. You can kind of see that, and it's kind of nice and golden, and it's got a really dense, moist crumb. Yes, and it's actually really not hard to make. And also, if you noticed, it doesn't have any second rising, third rising, punching down. You just plop it into the pan, and then after it rises, you stick it in the oven, and you're done. So it's actually quite easy, and it's got so much cheese and egg yolk and olive oil and butter that it really stays moist for a long time too. So you can make it a couple days ahead of time, and it's still quite moist when you get to it on Easter.
Oh, yes. Mm.
It looks wonderful.
Thanks.
Buona Pasqua.
Elaine.
Grazie.
Elaine, do you put the olive leaf in before you bake it, or?
Yes, I put the olive leaf in after it rises, stick the olive leaf in, and then put it in the oven. So that's the only thing y'all aren't seeing me do because it takes 2 hours to rise. It takes 2 hours in my house because my house is kind of cold. If you're in a house with heat, then it might take less time. But I'm going to give it 2 hours before I stick it in the oven.
You think we can use? Do you
1
think
hour to bake?
You think we can use a magnolia leaf here in Mississippi?
I think
No.
You know what I would do if I were you? I would take the palm out your palm and cut the tip off of the palm and stick it in there.
Oh, that'd be
That's
cute.
what I would
Yeah.
do.
Well, can I ask you a question about the frescoes?
Yes.
They looked. I didn't remember. I was there years and years ago, and I didn't remember them being as fragmented. Was some of that earthquake damage?
Some of it's earthquake damage.
Yeah.
In the 2017 or the 1970?
No, before that.
97, I think it was, or something like that.
I don't remember the dates, but there was a relatively recent earthquake that damaged a lot of the paintings and a lot of the frescoes in the church. So, yeah, they painstakingly tried to put them back together, but there's still some lacunae.
Okay, and on the bread, could you gild the lily and toast it and butter it?
You see how much butter went in there? I think if you toasted it, actually, I haven't tried toasting it, but I think if you toasted it, would just the butter would just ooze up. It would be really good. You
Maybe
can
put some honey on there.
That sounds good. Yeah, maybe I'll try that. That sounds very good. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to send y'all the recipe, and I would love it if y'all would try this because it's worth the effort. It's really not difficult, and it's very much worth it, and it'll make your Easter breakfast just perfect.
Wow. Wonderful class today.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope y'all enjoyed that. We kind of ran through the pictures in Assisi, but I wanted y'all to get an idea of the kind of different artists who were there and some of that kind of cross-contamination going on and kind of an idea of Francis. So I hope y'all enjoyed it. Thank you very much for tuning in.
Grazie Elaine, grazie Lorenzo.
Grazie a tutti. Buona Pasqua.
For your
Mille grazie.
Grazie a Sergio, però. Grazie a Sergio.
Sergio.
E buona Pasqua.
Buona Pasqua.
Buona Pasqua a tutti.
Buona Pasqua.
Ciao.
Merci, France.
Alessandra, cosa hai detto te?
Congratulations for the award for the olive oil.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
a great new. Also, I mean, it's really good the oil, so it's nice that you got also a prize.
Yes.
I know I was happy with the oil. I mean, I'm happy to make the best oil we can possibly make, and that's what we do anyway. But it is nice to have the confirmation. So,
it
we're
seems that
pleased.
you are not just doing your best; you do the best in Italy. That is not bad.
Yes. Elaine, I have some extra olive oil in my pantry. So if anyone wants some, they can contact me. But since you have 3 hearts, it's going to be very, very expensive.
You can do it. We're not marking it up. You can't mark it up. Now we are literally out, and I'm kind of sorry about that, but that's the way it went. We're going to try to make more next year. So we'll have more oil in October, and in the meantime, there are 3 retailers in the United States, and Luann may be on the line. Olio to Go is one of them, and then I'll send y'all the links tomorrow or the next day for where you can find the olive oil in the United States. But you better snap it up quick. Although some of it, I think, is stuck in the Suez Canal. So they've been having some. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
There are shipment delays. But when I saw that Suez Canal thing, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's like.
Right.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. Happy Easter to everybody. Grazie a voi.
Ciao, auguri, buona Pasqua.
Auguri a
tutti a voi. Grazie. Ciao Lorenzo.
Alla prossima, Lorenzo e Elaine.
Alla prossima.
Alla prossima.
I'm taking one more quick peek to see who's online with us. Hey, everybody, Christine. Hey, Jenny. Grazie, I will. All right, bye, y'all. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Happy Easter.
And maybe in person next spring.
I hope so. Come visit.
I'm vaccinated and saving up. Coming.
Well, we're not vaccinated yet, so. You gotta wait for that. Once we're vaccinated, over here, okay?
Mi spiace.
Sooner or later, they'll get to us sooner or later. All right, thanks, y'all. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks,
Ciao, Lorenzo.
Arrivederci.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Arrivederci, Roma.